It's Friday, July 14th. Let's talk PlayStation. Let's start off with some firmware updates because we all love that stuff. PS4 firmware 4.72 was released this past week, and it was apparently meant to fix an issue with Final Fantasy 15 where if your system turned off improperly or something, Final Fantasy 15 would try to download a big patch or something that wasn't needed. So that's kind of the case there. But apparently, well, not apparently, I know this for sure, and many other people are experiencing this. 7.2 ended up causing a number of issues for some people where you just don't appear online anymore. There's always a red X next to your profile. So that's kind of an issue because I actually experienced this. Now, typically when Sony releases a lot of small firmware updates, there's always a vocal minority of people that run into some sort of issue. Often at times it's not that big. Sometimes people report their consoles bricking or something. It never seems to be that major. But every time it's like a very small incremental stability update or some sort of bug fix, it ends up causing some sort of issue. So expect 4.73 or whatever they plan to do relatively soon, I would assume. Unless, of course, it's something that they can fix server-side, which maybe that will be the case, so you won't have to download a new update. Moving on, Gran Turismo Sport finally has a release date. October 17th for North America, October 18th for Europe. Boom. We can finally expect a certain day to play this game. That's great news for GT fans. You know, that's, you can expect that. That game has a pretty huge cult following. Typical GT stuff. It's got PlayStation VR support. Another recent story I can remember from it is Kazunori Yamauchi recently said, maybe 2 weeks ago or something, I don't remember where he was saying this, but the car models in the game are so good. The car models specifically made for GT Sport, mind you, are so good that he's probably going to be using those same models for PlayStation 5. Basically, Sony's next hardware. I don't think he's specifically outed the name PlayStation 5. But he can expect to use those same car models, and I'm not into Gran Turismo whatsoever, but I also know a large majority of those cars are still PS2 models, but either way, that's neither here nor there. But GT Sport, October 17th. I got some info for you on the Uncharted movie. Tom Holland, the poised actor for a young Drake in the upcoming Uncharted movie, was recently in an interview with Joe.ie, and he was asked about the Uncharted movie, trying to just get a little bit of info out of Tom Holland, and he more or less said that it's just a conversation they were having about sort of the idea of him playing a young Nathan Drake, because typically the games show an older Nathan Drake, and it's just something that's not fully committed right now. It's more or less what he said, and I guess what to me it almost sounds like there's a certain level of skepticism in his voice and what he says. It almost seems like this is certainly not set in stone. So I guess Tom's trying to cover his ass, because I guess this kid also has a pretty bad reputation for just releasing a bunch of news and leaking a bunch of info and not keeping his mouth shut. So I think he's trying to stay a little hush-hush on this and not guarantee it, more or less. And we're all expecting that anyway. Anytime there's a video game movie and there's tons of news stories left and right about this happening, a new actress, a new director, we just have to wait and see until this thing actually comes out. And Tom is kind of reassuring us that is going to be the same case here. We're not for sure on the Uncharted movie. So on August 5th in Southeast Asia, they're going to be holding a PSX. There's going to be a PlayStation Experience event in Southeast Asia. So if you are in that area, and you can go there and check it out. It's going to be a one-day event. Now this is like, it's you see this and it's like, oh, it's a one-day event, so it's probably not going to be that big, and that's fine. That's certainly what I took away from it too. But this is very telling in a number of ways. One thing being, now that we have multiple PSXs going on, this might very well be the possibility of a PSX coming to Europe, a PSX maybe coming to the East Coast. This is becoming kind of a big thing. It's very apparent now that Sony is very committed to doing PlayStation Experience. Whereas before, when they did the first year, it was like, okay, that was cool, fans really enjoyed it. Will there be a second one? And then Sony immediately said, like, yeah, this will be an annual thing. And then you have year 2, again, same story, did really well. So it looks like this is going to be a big thing worldwide at this point. Now, you'd have to assume that the PSX being held in California every year will probably be the big one where it's a multi-day event and it will have actual, announcements and a press conference. But they could hold it at other venues and other areas and just be sort of like a PAX, where just local fans can come and enjoy PlayStation and hang out, and there can still be a bunch of developer panels and stuff like that. But this I think is a very good idea. It's kind of like what they do with like the Road to Greatness, where they tour around with PlayStation 4s and Vitas and let people play a bunch of games and stuff, kind of spreading like brand awareness and whatnot. And having something like PSX is very important for the brand loyalty that Sony's trying to go for. They want people they want their diehard fans to stay diehard fans and to hold a sort of event where people can go to. I mean, when you go to a convention, it's a big deal for a lot of people when they go. They feel this sort of camaraderie. They see their friends. They get to experience firsthand, talking to developers or online personalities. It's a really big, meaningful thing for a lot of people that end up going to these things. So for Sony to hold multiple PSXs, I think, would be big for them in the long run. Moving on to our final news story, we'll talk more about this theoretical PlayStation 5 or the next generation of consoles. Because recently, talking to Gaming Bolt, Wedbush Analyst Securities, Michael Pachter sort of discussed PlayStation 5 and his sort of predictions. We don't talk about Michael Pachter too often. Sometimes he's really hit or miss with his predictions because some can be really outlandish. He said some pretty crazy things in the past, and some are right on the money. And this is one where I feel like he is right on the money. So with PlayStation 5, he's predicting that the console will release around 2019, 2020 is where we can sort of expect it. And his sort of main reasoning there is that the 4K adaptation would be quite high at that point. The impact would be at around 50% in North America for most people to own a 4K television, whereas the rest of the world would be around 35%, which would seem like a good place for Sony to finally release a PlayStation 5 and say, hey, this is a 4K ready machine, especially considering Sony wants to release an affordable machine when they release their next console, right? So you don't want, Sony's not going to make that sort of mistake again with the PlayStation 3 where they release a $600 machine. They just don't want to do that, and it's a smart move for them to not do that. Consoles should be, affordable boxes. So at that time, you would assume PlayStation 5, they'd want to price it again somewhat competitively, $400 at the most, you would hope, to be a 4K ready machine. So that sort of timing right there would be pretty good. He's also predicting what I've been echoing for the longest goddamn time, is that it would be backwards compatible with PlayStation 4. So this is kind of a thing where it's I more or less agree with him on all fronts. It just sort of adds up and makes way too much sense. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, I've said these things numerous times to you all. Not to sort of get credit here, but it's that's sort of the timeline you should really sort of expect. In a sort of realistic manner when you can expect PlayStation 5 and the reasoning for expecting it during that sort of time frame and sort of expecting backwards compatibility out of it, that's sort of where you should see it. Some people are expecting PlayStation 5 as early as 2018, and I don't know where the hell people are getting that idea from. I think that's sort of insane. Now, when you look at 2018 as a possibility, yes, it sort of adds up to a 5-year life cycle, and Sony's been open about it, how they expect this console cycle to not be as long as PS3 and 360, which that was a very long life cycle. So some people are looking at 2018 as a possibility, but you got to sort of keep in mind, at least, we had that sort of stopgap with PS4 Pro. PS4 Pro is still a thing at full price. It hasn't seen any price cuts or anything, so just expect a completely new machine in 2018 is a bit crazy to me, especially considering that that PS4 is still selling extremely well. Sony is in no rush to release a PlayStation 5. It just would seem odd to release PlayStation 5 when PS4 is selling so well. You're going to be cannibalizing the hardware at that point. Not only are people sort of predicting the same motion, but Sony is outlining the same motion. That was our news story 2 episodes ago. We know what Sony wants to do, so expecting anything different would create some pretty false expectations. And this is all, I think, pretty good for the most part. I think you couldn't really have a more ideal situation for a PlayStation 5 when Sony's ready to show it off and actually release the thing. You got backwards compatibility. 4K adaptation would be pretty high at that point. It would be a very powerful machine, for the price that you would pay. You would expect Sony to not do the same mistakes that they had made previously. So it just kind of bodes a pretty good future for PlayStation. What I'm more intrigued by at this point is, because now that we know the sort of console outline, I would like to see sort of different outlines, sort of different strategies. What are they going to do with PSN in the long-term future? Are they going to, obviously they're committed to PlayStation Now, but what about adding more premium PS2 classics to the store? What about bringing PlayStation 1 games? What about PlayStation VR? When are we going to see a version 2 of that? Is that going to launch, let's say, day and date with PlayStation 5? Maybe a little bit after? Will you announce PlayStation 5 and also announce PlayStation VR? How are they going to sort of do those two together, right? I think they're very committed to PlayStation VR, and I would really want to see what they would do at that point. At 2019, 2020, you could probably see some very impressive VR down that road, and you would especially see it in the PC landscape too. So I would want to see Sony's vision for that as well. So we have a good outline, but there's still like a lot of unanswered questions, and I'm ready to see them. Those are just some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. This Monday, you can get ready for part 1 of the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy. Just Crash 1 remaster. Did pretty well. I took a week of like practicing the game because you just sort of need it if you're not really good at Crash Bandicoot. You know what? It's not terribly difficult, but like it can bring out the worst in you, and I can get pretty pissy with those games, or just games in general. Quite honestly, I'm pretty bad. I don't break shit, but I can get pretty loud. Anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you guys next Friday.